And so I really felt like it was, for me, a very transformational experience to learn to have the respect for it. You don't get to fear it. You have to respect it. You have to hold space for it. You can't ignore it. You can't pretend it's not there, because that's how you get hurt. But as soon as you go, okay, you're here and I'm here and we're going to work together to do something really cool, that's where it kind of really supercharged that transformation in my life. And it made me feel so much more confident. It opened up interesting conversations with different people. It took me to places I'd never been before. I started going out into the desert and soaking in sun under the full moon and going out into the forest and going to festivals. And I really got to experience joy for the first time in my life through the path that took on me. And it had me confronting, again, so many of my own limiting beliefs that the growth needed for that was like it life-changing. And who I am today is not who I was before I found it. So I would say if I had to pick one single thing that it took so much of me to get there, but then once I did and realized that it was just a piece of my soul that I needed to integrate, what else can't I do? What else can't I achieve? And it really helped me also have a very healthy outlet for negative emotions. And those things, they do need processing. They do need handling. So that was the thing that facilitated a ton of change in my life.
Today's guest is Chanelle Barona of the Wayfinder's Path, is the Queen of Wands, which is a tarot card. Chanelle is a spiritual entrepreneur based in Los Angeles. Her specialties include tarot reading, fire and flow performance, photography and videography. Her aligned work is centered around the arts, activism, healing, spiritual growth, and creative opportunities for small business to thrive. Welcome, Chanelle.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I'm really excited for this conversation. So what is one of the most courageous things that you have done after reading that?
After reading that, there's been quite a few things, but I'm not going to lie that actually joining our local fire spinner community was probably the biggest leap for me. I did so right after the pandemic, and I had been very isolated through all of that. I had different creative outlets over the years, but this one really hit home in a very different way. It was something I wanted to do for about a year and a half before I actually got the opportunity because of the pandemic. I had just discovered it, was super enthused about it, and then I was injured, and then the world locked down, and life gets a little crazy, and I all of a sudden had all this doubt. Maybe that was something I was never going to do. I was contending with some pretty heavy energies, especially in isolation. I was thinking that the directions I was going to be going in my life, for a while there, I have a back injury, and I didn't think I was going to be able to do any of these things that I wanted to do out of life. And that really kind of put me in not the best place. And I remember feeling so scared because I was just so new at this, and it seemed so far removed from myself. It seemed so impossible for me at the time. Again, my health wasn't the best. I've never done any form of movement or dance, not really since I'd been like a kid. And it turned something I always enjoyed, but didn't quite ever think was possible for me. I thought I didn't resonate with, or that people wouldn't resonate with me. I didn't feel like I fit a certain type of person, the type of expectations around that. And I ended up really finding myself through that process. And of course, it's about confronting your fear is a huge part of fire spinning for me. Because it's literally you first time you touch it, the first time you're close to it, your heart races. You have to learn how to not react to the fear, because that's actually how you get hurt. And so I really felt like it was, for me, a very transformational experience to learn to have the respect for it. You don't get to fear it. You have to respect it. You have to hold space for it. You can't ignore it. You can't pretend it's not there, because that's how you get hurt. But as soon as you go, okay, you're here and I'm here and we're going to work together to do something really cool, that's where it kind of really supercharged that transformation in my life. And it made me feel so much more confident. It opened up interesting conversations with different people. It took me to places I'd never been before. I started going out into the desert and soaking in sun under the full moon and going out into the forest and going to festivals. And I really got to experience joy for the first time in my life through the path that took on me. And it had me confronting, again, so many of my own limiting beliefs that the growth needed for that was like it life changing. And who I am is today is not who I was before I found it. So I would say if I had to pick one single thing that like it took so much of me to get there, but then once I did and realized that it was just a piece of my soul that I needed to integrate, that like what else can't I do? What else can't I achieve? And it really helped me also have a very healthy outlet for negative emotions. And those things, they do need processing, they do need handling. So
Mhm.
that was the thing that facilitated a ton of change in my life.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful, Chanelle. And I'd love to know more about that. So first tell me, what took you on a journey of specializing in to tarot readings?
So I've always had an interest in it. Growing up, a lot of what was in pop culture, there was a lot of, Sabrina the Teenage Witch and, Charmed and all these things. And so I always liked it. I didn't really think too much on it back then. But it does run in my family to have some kind of extrasensory gifts. I did have paranormal experiences as a child, things that I couldn't really explain, but things that as I've learned more about like what's really common experiences for people, we're all very, very normal to have if you are a sensitive person and you're open to that, which most of us are, but as many things, it's an aptitude. Some people have more, some have less. Everybody can learn
Mm.
if they put in enough time and effort, though. So we all have access to it. Some of us, it comes more naturally than others, or it runs, and a lot of that comes around acceptance. And I feel like it was something I kind of spirituality, it was something I really disconnected from and didn't think of because outside of my family was somewhat Christian, but not super religious. Outside of that, there's all that shame. There's a lot of shame around it. There's a lot of shame about the occult and paganism and anything other than
Mm.
mainstream, organized religion. But that never particularly resonated with me. When I was very young, it did because I found the stories interesting, and I do believe that a lot of different experiences. They're different communities, different cultures, experiences of a shared space. A lot of this is things I kind of learned over the years. I again always had an interest. I got my first deck in 2007. I had a school that we had a arts curriculum instead of like a normal school curriculum that I was a part of. And instead of our senior projects, we ran a Ren fair, and you had to like have a character and you had to create a whole persona. And that was how you got graded like for your senior project. And I one year was like, you know what? I think I'm going to be a tarot reader. And I wanted to, because I thought it would be cool. I didn't know how to do it though. I ended up completely chicking out, completely deviating from my character that I was supposed to be playing because I was feeling insecure because I didn't have it memorized. I'd never really done it before, but it was too much to memorize. It was so much information and so much knowledge that it just was very overwhelming to me. And I still have that deck. I actually brought it today in case we want to look at some cards. This is the original deck. And I really didn't pursue it. I had the deck. I ended up inheriting the same deck again twice, was given another one, and that time with a book though, versus just like the deck of cards.
Mhm.
And I never really read it. I always wanted to, but again, every time I looked at it, imposter syndrome. Every time I looked at it, it was just too much information. And so I didn't really think about it. I focused on some of my other career goals. Back at the time, it was mostly photography. And I was really trying to make that work for myself. And then back in like 2015, 2016, I really was at this like tipping point in my life. And I was like, I'm tired. I had another, yet again, another toxic job. And I was like, how can I do this? How can I make working for myself a thing? That was something I'd wanted to do for a long time. That was what started my photography journey. But
Mhm.
it wasn't getting it there. It wasn't quite cutting it. I live in Los Angeles. It's very cutthroat. It's very competitive, but also a city that has lots of opportunity. And I was like, where do I go from here? How do I make this happen? And I had this job I hated. I had a really abusive boss. And didn't have another job lined up. And I was like, what am I going to do? I don't have a lot of money. I'm really stressed. And I'm sitting on my couch. I've asked all my friends. I've asked my family. I've asked
Mm.
my friend, what do I do? Do I quit my job? I don't have a backup. What am I going to do? Like, going around in circles. Everybody's like, we can't tell you what to do. And so I was like, okay, sitting on my couch, and all of a sudden I hear, I have your answer. And I look over at
Oh.
my bookshelf and I know that it was the tarot card that said it to me. 2015 or so was about the kind of, I was having a bit of a resurgence and an interest in extrasensory gifts at that point. I was kind of exploring that a little. I wanted to be more witchy, more spiritual. And so I was already open-minded to it, but I was kind of re-embracing it after having shut away from it for about 7 or 8 years after a scary incident happened for me. Story for
Oh,
another time, maybe. But and I really hadn't thought about it in a long time because I had been so closed off to it. And it was like, I have your answer. And I'm like, okay, why not? And I'm about to flip a coin because I can't make a decision on this. And I pull out the deck, I grab the book, I still have it. And I pulled a card. And I pulled the Two of Swords, which for anybody who studies tarot, this card rules indecision. I'm like, oh, that's on the nose, thanks. But the book I was using at the time wasn't really telling you about the cards themselves. It was telling you about, in this context, this is how to interpret it. And I do believe that spirit wants to work with you. You know, how whatever you call it, the universe, spirit, God, you know, it wants to work with you. And so it's going to use the tools available at that time to communicate with you. So it can be, that's why there's so many kinds of divination. There's all different kinds of mediumship, you know, that there's all these things. And that book told me that I needed to trust what my heart was telling me. That, you know, I needed to use those what feels right. What's my gut say? What's my head say? What, like, it's or not my head, not like the logic part of your head, but I like to
yes.
say not your two eyes, your third eye.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
but use that part to make the decision. Doesn't matter what logic says. Logic is probably going to confuse you right now and not give you any clarity because logic said stay, but it wasn't right. And I said, okay, I'm going to quit. And then I went into work the next day. And there had been obviously tension with my boss. And he said something to me that was just, I was thinking, I'm going to quit. And he said something really, really rude and really, really offensive to me at like 10 o'clock on a Monday morning. I worked at a bar, mind you. So this is, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
I just looked at him and I went, no, I'm out. You can tend this bar for the rest of this day. And I quit on the spot, never looked back, never regretted it. It was kind of like, whoa, that tarot helped me so much. And so then I started
Yeah.
using it to make other decisions over the next
Mm-hmm.
couple of days. I was like, wait, okay, this is genuinely good insight that I'm getting from this. And I don't know what's up to it, but it's just all of a sudden it's working. And then I started pulling cards for like my roommate and my friends. And it
Yeah.
just started happening. And everybody was like, wow, why do you know how do you know this? What? Yeah, I didn't tell you. And I'm like, I swear I don't. That's just what, I don't know. It's just working for me right now. And I went online, mind you, I just quit my job. Rent was due in 2 weeks. And I went online and to a networking group in my community and said, hi, you know, I've been, you know, just doing this for myself, taking some of the advice. It's really been feeling aligned. And I've been having really good track record of people finding the information I give them helpful. And if anybody's interested and wants like for a donation, like $5 or $10, I'm just trying to make ends meet. And people seem to be really enjoying this. And it took off. I ended up paying my rent
Wow.
that reading tarot. Not that I think that all divination and things need to be monetized, not that all hobbies do, but in this case, it happened to be something that, you know, it just felt very in place and very aligned for me. And within a couple of months, I had a regular round of clientele, and it was really going well for me. And there's been you know, that was almost 8 years ago, 9 years ago. So there's been ups and downs since then, and challenges and fears and all kinds of things that have come up, and evolutions of my business. And it's been there ever since. It never went away after that. And the deeper the relationship I've built with it, the deeper the relationship with myself has been, the better, more aligned I've felt as a person. People really tell me that it can be a very they tell me you give me life-changing information, you know, and it just feels like it's one of those things like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. Like, this is one of the gifts that I'm supposed to share with people. And so I'm just looking for new opportunities to connect to people and share my love of this and maybe help some people find some guidance or trust their own intuition when it comes to finding tools that help themselves.
That's brilliant. Absolutely beautiful. And I love the way it was the calling for you. That's
Really
brilliant.
was. And it's one I didn't even know I had. Like,
Mm.
there's like interest again on it felt like a hobby interest at first, but
Mhm.
it just became a part of my soul's purpose at this point. Like, it's one of the reasons I was born here, and it's one of the reasons it's the work I'm supposed to do. I think there's more than one thing that I do, but this is definitely one of them.
Excellent. That's brilliant. So tell me more about your healing work, and is that through your spiritual growth and you've learned about how to help people heal? Because I know how much healing is so important for all of us to have a healthier life. So can you just touch on that?
Absolutely. Of course, it's wide ranging depending on who I'm talking to.
Mm-hmm,
Healing
mm-hmm,
can be as simple as me saying one piece of word. Sometimes somebody sits down and says, "I have a question about this," and I'm like, "Absolutely not." And they're like, "That's all I needed. That I just needed that confirmation so I could trust my intuition." Really, there's two things that people say to me that are like, there's two.
mm-hmm,
Wow, oh my God, I had no idea. But why does this all resonate? Why does this make sense? And I feel protected because of this. Or they go, yep, that's everything that I knew. I just needed somebody outside of myself to that didn't have like attachment to the situation to tell me the same thing. Like I needed somebody to confirm what I already knew in my heart. And that's what obviously confirmation bias you do have to watch out for, but we all check ourselves from somebody else.
mm-hmm,
And tarot can be, like I said, from frivolous and lighthearted to some people to I've had people cry. I've had to hold people through end of life experiences. I've had to hold
mm-hmm,
them through deep rooted childhood trauma. Some funny enough, like in the middle of a bar mitzvah, I ended up helping a man through a lifetime of trauma with his family sitting around him, holding his hand, going, he doesn't talk about this, and it's 50 years overdue. And so it can go very,
mm-hmm,
very deep if people are willing. And I feel like so obviously I study a lot about like neuroscience and therapy and quantum physics and
mm-hmm,
science, and I really like to keep myself rounded to all things. But what I've really learned with tarot in particular is there's healing when you got a broken bone, you go to a doctor to set it.
yeah.
When you are processing your childhood trauma, yeah, going to a therapist can work for all of those things. But and tarot can work for the mundane and the healing, but it also touches base on things that run a little bit deeper. Like somebody
Mm-hmm,
told me, and I was like, that is so true, that therapy addresses what happens in this life. Tarot and esoteric can address what happens in your past lives, in your future, in your family, like deep in your trauma that you don't even know that you carry. It can give you all different kinds. It is a little bit broad to say, I know, and a little bit more vague because it is such an each reading is independent and personal on what that healing might look like. But I have had things come through for literal healing. Like I told someone I feel like there could be something like surgery in your future, and she goes, "I'm literally scheduled for surgery in 48 hours."
gosh.
And so there are things that come
Mm-hmm,
through, and it's
mm-hmm,
really quite interesting. But a lot of people tell me that it sets them up for upwards of 6 months sometimes. And I was like, this is great for you, great for my soul, terrible for my business. Is what I like to joke, because you don't have to necessarily come back as often. But I really find that people are able to. It kind of holds up a mirror. If you take the
mm-hmm,
magic away from it all, and you just say,
yeah.
what are these? Each card represents an archetype. And each of those archetypes are universal human experiences. It's something we all will probably go through at one point or another in our lives. And so it's not like the information in them is actually truly groundbreaking in that way, but applying it to the
Mm-hmm,
situation at hand, how this item comes out at this one and how they communicate in the story that's told through them, I think really helps people get a perspective of where they're coming from, where they're at right now,
mm-hmm,
where they're going, maybe other sides to the story, maybe other perspectives they need to have. And also sometimes just the tough love needed that tarot is known for. I always tell people, if you want love and light and gentle and like, I'm encouraging you, good job, get an oracle deck. If you would like a little bit more
absolutely.
directness, tarot is probably the one for you. I do offer both, but tarot is my main bread and butter, I would say. So I do feel like it's definitely a very personal journey, because what makes tarot
Mm-hmm,
powerful is it's all about the question that you ask. When you pull a card, there's an intent behind that. And that is the context or the lens from which you view that card's message. And you go, okay, well, how does that message apply to my situation at hand? Because each tarot card has their own, and there are universal meanings to them. But then they combine in very unique ways for each individual.
wow. Absolutely fantastic. It's fascinating. I'm fascinated by it all. I love it.
It's
I mean,
very interesting. This
yeah.
tarot is made up of, they call it the Fool's Journey. And so the tarot is made up of 4 suits. one each element, like our playing decks of, familiar cards that we've seen.
Mhm.
And then there are the 22 major arcana, and those tell the story of the fool's journey. And the fool being ourself, right? We come into this world with no knowledge, with no experience, completely ignorant of everything around us. And then we have to learn and go on all these different paths and journeys. And so it doesn't matter what part of it that you're on, there's all these connections that are lessons of like, once you've done this one, well, if you're on this chapter, it means you probably just completed this one. And it ends up being such an in-depth experience too.
That's fantastic. So tell me, slightly touched on it, overcoming imposter syndrome fears in your journey. So what happened there?
Mostly shame, mostly other people's opinions of what I should or shouldn't do. When I was a kid, I would say young single digits, preteen, it was society being like, well, that's just junk. That's nothing. It was the church saying that's the devil and that's evil and it's a cult. I never really ascribed to that all that much. It never really resonated with me, because of my own experiences, but it also made me grow up with a ton of shame that like people would be like, you're crazy. I can't be walking around being like, I see ghosts. Now I do, but I didn't think that I was safe to do so back then, and we're all very social creatures. And that fear of being ostracized from that group, that person, or being pushed away. I'm also, on the ADHD spectrum area. And so that rejection sensitive, like dysphoria kind of thing was very, very prevalent to me as a kid, deep abandonment wounds, things like that. I had a pretty complicated childhood emotionally growing up. And it made me think that if I was different, that nobody was going to love me. And so that was a whole thing I had to unpack, that like, I am different, and that's kind of the point. And I don't really want to be like other people. I like to be my own self. I like having my sense of self, and I trust my values. But again, that took time. So when I was a kid, it was being bullied and being pushed away, and people being like, "Oh, you're the weirdo." And joke's on you guys now, because I am. But it's like, I'm much happier this way. But that was the first one. The one that really was the hardest for me, because again, I didn't really truly get into tarot until I was in my late 20s. And I was super into it, like so deeply involved in like building my thing, my spiritual community, trying to overcome the challenges in my life, trying to up level. And I had a partner at the time who I was seeing, and the cards were like, this is important. This isn't a person. This is a soulmate. I was like, whoa, like, I believe this stuff. And like, why is every time I pull a card about this someone, it's the same card, which collective energy is a thing that happens. You keep asking the same question, you're going to like get the same cards or similar cards, or you get the same messages from other cards. It's very trippy. And I kept getting it over and over. The Lovers, the Two of Cups, to the point that I was like, are you serious? And it ended up being one of the factors that freaked him out, and he dumped me. There were several reasons that were actually more to do with him, but it was like, that was the reason he cited at the time, was that the cards freaked him out. And so here I am having my literal worst fear ever thrown on me over something that felt completely authentic to me to do. And when I tell you, it took me 3 years to figure that out.
Wow.
And that was in 2019. And that was right around the time I actually found fire, looking for solace after that experience, looking for something like to get me out. I told my friends, get me out of the house, take me somewhere. And my friend's like, do you want to go to Burn Club? And I'm like, what's Burn Club? I'm like, people light stuff on fire and they dance with it. I was like, that sounds perfect. Let's go. And I saw it and like knew. So it's all connected too. It's all been, that's why the Wayfinder's Path is my expression through tarot and magic, and my performance art as well, because that's all what I have found. The Wayfinder's Path came first, fire came second. Right around that period, I kind of sat down as I started to become myself again. A few months later, that I started to have the first breakthroughs of, past grief and back into like empowerment. And I was like, you know what? I am never, ever going to have somebody push me away for this, that like, I'm not going to hide this about me. The fact that it wasn't well known is why it made, like, it bit me in the, bit me in the butt later, because if I'd just been honest about reading these cards and being, this is my path, this is my passion, this is my career, this is, an interest I have, this is my spirituality, I could have avoided that heartbreak because it probably never would have happened. And so I realized I should lead with this. From here on out, I'm going to introduce myself that way almost. Like I'm going to let people know that I do this right away, because if you're not my people, if you're the kind of person who's too judgy over this, you're simply not my person, and I would rather not waste my time on you. And so it really, it empowered me. It felt scary at the time, though, to be like, all right, I'm being vulnerable at this thing that has very deeply wounded me a couple of times in life. But I'd rather it be on the table and known than be walking into the wrong room again. And so that was very powerful for me. And then I also had some like bosses and people who were working in the spiritual world that I was like picking up work from, being like, you can't charge for it, or it doesn't count. Like, you know, if you charge, it's not real. And don't get me wrong, if it comes to investing in spiritual work and energy work, rule number one, never spend more than you're comfortable spending. You know, if you're going to feel devastated if that reading doesn't resonate for you, you probably shouldn't do it. You know, there are lots of scams out there. There are also lots of readers that simply aren't for you, or workers that aren't for you. You know, not every reader is for every person, and not every reading is going to deeply resonate with you if it's not someone that you're connected with. So, you know, make sure you're feeling connected to somebody's energy, or at least being like, what they're putting out, I got it, you know. Don't go out and feel like you have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or thousands of dollars to get this coach or this curse removed. Most of that is crap. Not to say that the energy work that is valued and well paid isn't extended, but you're allowed to ask what's your time and your energy is worth for whatever your offering is. And I had a lot of people come for me when I first started, and I had to kind of sit with that. Like, is it making me imposter? Is that trying to make this about work and not about energy, make it not valid? And the truth is, we live in a world where if everything was given to us and everything was free, it would be a different story, I think. But we do live in a world where money is still needed, and we can't always just pour from ourselves if we aren't ourselves sustained. And I've had to learn the journey of imposter syndrome in a couple of areas, you know, my photography as well. I had to have a lot of people be like, wow, you charge so much. Why do you think your time's, I've literally had people go, why do you think your time's worth that much? And having to unpack that and going, it's not worth that much to you, but to the right person, it is in fact worth it. And I have had people, it happened just a couple days ago. Somebody paid me over double what the actual rate was just because they felt it had that much value to them. I did not ask, but they paid me over twice my rate. And that happens, you know, people, that goes to show that if somebody loves what you do, they're going to tip, they're going to add extra even to what you charge. So for every person that says like, you can't do that, you can, as long as you are doing a fair, you know, ethical exchange of service and energy for monetary value, you know, that you're genuinely having the intent of helping people in the process, at least for energy work, or sharing a gift that you have, you're allowed to be sustained for that. And so there was just all these layers of every step of the way. This has not been easy. Every step, sometimes if you do I had other things when exploring activism, I didn't always do it right. If I'm conditioned to, you know, in a certain way, if I'm conditioned because of my background, because of my race, because of my religion, whatnot, those things are in me. And, you know, we're going to make mistakes sometimes. We're going to mean well and cause harm. You know, impact is greater than intent. And being able to learn and reflect from that's important. But just because the first time somebody tells you you fucked up, you know, that, pardon my language, that you've got to, like, you can't do this thing anymore. You know, it's always good to reflect on why somebody might be throwing something your way, because sometimes they might be right in some capacity, or it might be worth considering their perspective at the bare minimum so that you make sure that you're not just confirming only your own biases. It is important to hold space for those things, but then integrate and go, are they truth for me? And does it harm anybody if I do? Am I harming somebody in this process? And maybe I should keep those perspectives open. Definitely don't ever skirt reflection. And you see that a lot, actually, in a lot of spiritual work. There's a lot of love and light spirituality, as I'll call it. Love and light's beautiful. We need love and light in our life. But that without the other side, without the shadow work, it's not quite valid. It's very important. And I would say that most of tarot, not all, there is light work to be done through tarot, but tarot will really zero in on your shadow work. It is a little bit more karmic in that sense. So it's not always the lightest thing. You're not always going to get these lovey-dovey messages that are like, oh, you're going to get everything you want. That happens. But you're also going to get ones where it's going to be like, this happened to me this week. It was like, why aren't you over your crap yet? Why you're still addicted to that thing that you're not supposed to be addicted to, that is bad for you. And you're like, damn it. Okay, fine. It's gonna call you out. But I'm a direct communicator, and so I like that. I like directness. I don't want someone to like hold my hand and lead me into the mess. I'd rather than be like, that's a problem, don't go there. And I'd be like, oh, okay, let me, reflect and review on that. And so I would say that anything that you're getting a lot of opposition, that's going to bring up imposter syndrome, because we as humans are social creatures. It's something actually taught in astrology over one of the particular axes, which is the Leo Aquarius axis, that talks about our connection to the self, like, well, not just the self, but like us as an individual makes us special, but also it makes us stick out of the crowd, but also what makes us be accepted by the group. And there's this that's important dynamic, when it comes to how humans evolved. We've become the species that we are because of community, not because of, we're not solitary creatures. We're not independent apex predators. We live in groups. Somebody pointed out something really recently to me that I was like, whoa, that's actually a really cool way of thinking it. And it was talking about babies, like babies of all different animals, right? Whatever they need to survive should be available at birth. So like, a wildebeest or a giraffe, an elephant, they got to be up and able to walk and keep up with the herd right away. Because that is what their survival counts on. What do human babies do when they are born? They cry because they need help. Like from infancy, we are in fact dependent on other people. And if we do have this very isolated culture now that yes, you can go live in your house and never leave and order everything through DoorDash and not like, you don't have to leave, but that's not our normal way of being. And so that's where I think imposter syndrome really just hits us on such a deep, like ego brainstem instinct kind of a way, is that on the inside, we're terrified that we will be ostracized from the group in a way, and that will mean that we are cut off from life sustaining things. And that can be a risk, and that can be a challenge, especially when you do something that's against the social norm. Part of my own journey is breaking those social norms and being an innovator and a leader on those social norms. Like, I tend to be the first one to do things, and everybody's like, that's a bad idea, don't do that, why would you do that? Or you don't know what you're talking about. 6 months later, I'm like, well, and they're like, come around, it's like, I told you so. And I'm like, I'm really not trying to be that way. I see this as the logical, maybe not the logical conclusion, the energetic conclusion to this. And I already know where it's going. We can obviously have perception for the future from our logic brain, but the real secret spot's when all the pieces are on hand. The logic is on board, your intuition's on board, your heart's on board. If all three are in agreement, oh my gosh, please do it. Please do the thing. Like, if all of the parts of you are like, do it, and you're still having imposter syndrome, I promise you it will work out. I don't care if you do it and it is a leap of faith. Do it, because it has, and I will say this from personal experience, it has never, ever not worked out. Scared to do it every time? Yes. Does it work out to feel like you're like, I'm jumping out of a plane without a parachute? I cannot tell you why it works, just that it does. And I've actually found, and this is a lesson the collective's been drilling since, I want to say 2012, if memory serves, but like, it's been over 10 years. It's been a minute. And that is leave your comfort zone to die. Like, staying in your comfort zone is not an option. You might have even found in your experience that, like, if you stayed in your comfort zone way too long and stayed out your welcome, something external comes in and boots you out of it. You're in a job that you don't like, you get fired. You're in a relationship you're like, I don't know what to do. You get dumped. Just happened to me, and I was like, you know what? You're right. I was worried about that. And that I needed that clarity. Thank you. Next. And it will push you, especially right now, as we're recording this. It's not only Friday the 13th now, which is fun. But it's also definitely eclipse season, and we're hotbed eclipse season. We do these all the time, but they're great times of change. And almost everybody's probably going to be challenged in some way right now to take that leap of faith. Or that thing that you're just holding on to that's outdone, it's likely to be removed. And I don't, my takeaway of that would be, like, embracing that change ends up leading to the growth of what you actually want, because you have to leave your comfort zone in order to grow. If it's your comfort zone, it's what's known, it's what's familiar. But if it's outside of your comfort zone, it's going to inherently be uncomfortable. It's going to feel challenging. And learning to actually embrace those feelings and being like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to be excited about it because I've got to be going somewhere, because where I was didn't make
Absolutely.
me happy. And so it took more than once for these lessons, for that imposter syndrome, for me to
Mhm.
realize that it's crap. It doesn't, that's something your brain tells you because your ego
Mhm.
likes the known. It's what feels
Mhm.
safe. It's what feels secure. But
Mhm.
it's absolutely worth it. And again, I've done it fire. I did it with tarot. I did it with photography. I also did it with burlesque.
Mhm.
Now that was a whole other ball game, being like, that's the level of vulnerable that was like even after that. And so there's all these things that, like, if you're scared of it, unless there's this like, yeah, that's a bad idea kind of internal
Mhm.
voice that's very calm, it's probably something worth doing. If it's
Yes.
just making your ego trip out, probably something worth doing. But when in doubt, check your intuition. It's not going to feel like panic, and it's not going to feel like anxiety if it's for
Mm.
you. It will feel like anxiety if it's not for you sometimes, but it will always feel like anxiety. Like, if it's not for you, yeah, it's not going to feel great. But it might be for you and you still might feel anxiety, because the ego is the first response in the brain. When a situation comes up, you have the ego response before you have like your frontal lobe, higher thinking brain response. So it's totally normal, and you will never really get away from having those knee-jerk ego, imposter syndrome, I can't reactions, because that's just the way our brain's hardwired. It's a survival mechanism that has kept us alive for millions of years, and every living being on the planet. Don't do this thing
Absolutely.
because it hurt somebody once. And so there's that awareness, and
Mm.
we do carry that knowledge in us. That's it. Generational trauma and instinct, in my opinion, are the same thing. There's something somewhere in our DNA that maybe science doesn't understand yet, but we carry the knowledge of what has come before us. We carry our parents' knowledge, we carry their parents' knowledge, and theirs and theirs and theirs back to the beginning of life is somewhere in our DNA. And being that most living beings share something like 80 to 90% of their DNA, I don't know the number exact, but they share
Mhm.
this. That's something that all life shares, and they don't like unfamiliar things. So imposter syndrome to me has actually kind of like become a green flag. It means I'm barking up the right tree. Like having that fear response that's not just panic, but it's just like that kind of there's not really substance to it. It doesn't really hold up if you stop and you really ground yourself and you think about it. But it can get you in that moment. It can get you in that reactive way. And so I feel like that slaying imposter syndrome, and guess what, it's all going to get the best of us sometimes. We're all going to have those moments, but it's more about pushing through that fear than it is about letting you stay where you're at if you're unhappy with where you're at.
Absolutely. Yeah. And would you say those are, I know you slightly touched on it, lessons from the tarot about fear, or is that something
There are
slightly
definitely
different?
lessons in the tarot about fear.
Mm.
There's various
Mm.
cards. There's a bunch of cards. So, like, for example, just to name a
Mm.
couple, the moon is one of the more complex cards in tarot, but one most people know. We've seen the artwork, we know what it looks like.
Mhm.
And it talks about intuition and fear simultaneously. The
Mm.
moon being something that illuminates things, it shows you things. So if you're out wandering around in the dark and it's a new moon and it's dark out, you can't see, you don't know where you're going to go. It's kind of nerve wracking because you're like, I might trip over something, somebody might attack me. I don't really know what's going on. But the full
Mhm.
moon comes out and it sheds light on your path, and you go, oh, okay, I can see where I'm going. But the lesson of it goes that even when the moon's not there, the path still is, and that your
Mhm.
intuition can help you navigate it, even in the face of feeling fear. But you can feel like fear triggered, and you can feel like intuition after that, but you cannot feel both love and fear simultaneously. They can kind of dance back and forth,
Mm.
you can oscillate between them, but you can't feel both at the same time. And so if you're constantly stuck in fear, you're going to have a hard time connecting to intuition and your intuitive subconscious guidance. And so there's that one. As far as like overcoming ego, I really think that the strength card is one of those.
Mhm.
It's traditionally depicted by like a lion being like, and then like this woman trying to gently close this lion's jaws, and she's in like a white dress. Not the, when you look at this card, people see the lion and they go, that's strength, right? But who's the strong one on that card? The one that's freaking out or the one that's taming the beast? And it kind of goes to show that sometimes like holding yourself back, not just leaping to that conclusion, is really strong. That's actually what strength is. I think that holding yourself back and restricting yourself sometimes takes more strength than it does to lash out. So that's one of them. You've got the nightmare card, the nine of swords, but it also tells you that what's a nightmare? Is it real? It's usually based in something. It's usually based in something subconscious, but it doesn't always have a real big scary thing. My favorite way to describe it is if you've ever been scared by that pile of laundry you left on a chair, thinking it was like an intruder or a person in your house or something. You're like, what is that? And then you realize it's just laundry. Yeah, you do have to put the laundry away so that stops happening, but it may not be quite as big and as scary as you fear it might be. But it might keep you up at night. It might give you anxiety. So it says, take action on the things you can change so that these things don't keep bothering you. But it says, but make sure that you're not just being scared of the dark, because it may not actually be nearly as terrifying as you think. I'm sure there's several others, but they're not coming to mind at the moment, but that's just an example of a couple of cards. So there's definitely lessons that apply to all things. And then there may be individual ones that apply in a very uniquely personal way to your experience at the time as well.
Chanelle, you said you've got your cards there. Shall we pull a card for the collective, as in, I wouldn't know how to word it, but for the listeners, how can we use the cards today?
So my general intention, like when people sit down for a reading and they go, well, I don't know what I want to ask, but I want to have a reading, is my go-to intention is, what do we need to hear right now for our highest good and for the highest good of everybody involved? Because we don't want to, we try to ground ourselves, make sure we're not being just selfish towards it. But what do we need to know right now? And my advice for all collective readings is not everything I'm going to say is going to resonate with every person. Take the piece, that might be for one listener, that might be for one person who's here to read it. But I do believe that if anybody's present to hear, if somebody's listening over your shoulder and they hear something, it might be for them too. So take it where it resonates. It's okay if you leave the rest. Depends on how specific they are. And the messages vary from reading to reading. So let's see. 7 of Pentacles reversed. This is a card that preaches patience. Well, it's one of two things. It either says you are being very impatient. You're waiting. It's the equivalent of you just planted seeds and you're like, where's my harvest? It's not here yet. It takes time. Things are going to happen in their own timing. There's no need to rush anything right now. It's not really a good time to try to push unless you have to, because it's eclipse season as well. And the other meaning is, it's 7 of Pentacles, is why are you watering a dead plant? When it's reversed, at least. And so it preaches patience, but it also wants to make sure that you're not wasting resources on something that is expired, something that's dead, something that's dying. There may be a need to focus on what is growing, make sure you're not neglecting the important things in the meantime, but that so like I said, if something has run its course, please don't put any more energy into it. It's not the time for it. And as I mentioned earlier, this quality of time that we're in while we're recording, if you continue to invest in something that's not for you, it's a very good chance it will be taken away anyways. Something will come up and you'll be like, oh, well, there's the question. The plant's gone now. It got torn out. But it kind of says have patience, show up when it needs to. You got to water plants, got to water them 6 to 8 months before they have some fruit usually, waiting for it to grow. So try not to be too restless, but also make sure that you're not taking no action when it's time. This can also mean for some people that you've been waiting and waiting, and now some things are going to start happening. So if you've been feeling like you're stuck in that waiting group, I'd say this is only some of the people that are listening, that if there's something you've been investing time in, that, again, knowing whether your team time to walk away from it because I'm wasting energy on it, or it's time to make sure I stick this out and hold out a little longer because there is going to be some shift and some movement coming soon. To again, take that where that resonates and where the rest of these cards come out. The Lovers. So the Lovers obviously can mean partnership, divine partnership. It is worth mentioning. So eclipses come in pairs. There's 2 of them. The one that's in October, on October 2nd, is in Libra, which is a Venus ruled sign, which can often talk about partnerships in astrology. So there is going to be, for a lot of people, either big closures around love life and partnerships and intimate partnerships, And there's going to be others where new stories are starting. The Lover's card in some other forms of tarot is also known as the choice, because this talks about things that we have that are long-term commitments. This isn't, I went on a date with you. It's not, you got married and somebody said, I do, and that's the last thing you do. What do you do for a commitment? You show up again and again, which I would like to point out kind of draws parallels to that Seven of Pentacles reversed, which is saying you got to show up for it. You got to put in the work if you want to reap the rewards. So particularly for some of you, this is not for everybody, but some of you who are in partnership have been working and doing like pouring into a relationship. And if it's not coming back to you, I'm going to be a little direct, probably is something that needs to come to an end. If somebody's been pouring into you and you're not giving them back anything in return, please cut them loose. Save them the time, save yourself the time. But if you have been making, again, like putting time in and effort, that's what commitment is doing something incrementally over time. So if you want something to last, you have to put in energy over time. So if you're feeling frustrated, you keep having to put that energy, keep that in mind, keep that frame. And like I said, it's also called the choice, which means that a lot of us are going to be presented choices coming up. I'm going to throw this out in the next 6 weeks. We're very, very karmic through middle of November right now, especially in the US, but also abroad in the world, as the US as a world power, it is affecting world politics and world economics and things like that. We're going through it, as most people know.
Yes.
That's that's an entire other conversation. But you personally, we will be facing choices, and you're going to have to decide left or right. Do I stay? Do I go? And really look at what has happened over the past 6 months around your energy output, especially since mid-March and early April. That was our last 2 eclipses. So these are somewhat of a continuation of that. The 1 October is the last one in the sign of Libra as well. So we are closing out a very big cycle. We're going to have to make a choice. And that choice can be commitment or to break off. That choice can be to start seeing somebody new. That choice could be to change something about yourself. You've been committed to your own misery, your own success. But, maybe it's time to switch that story up. And maybe it's time to look at the things you've been committed to for a very long time and either continue, decide, I'm going to continue with this and this is what's right for me and this is a long-term thing for me, or I think this is not long-term for me, so I'm going to make a different choice and a different shift.
Excellent.
And I'll do one more just for what's coming in the future as well, like kind of closing remarks. Let's see here. 4 of Swords reversed, going forward. So there's going to be, if you've been slow, it's not going to be slow much longer. This one's team me. I just went from the 2 slowest months of my actual career to my calendar's full through November right now. So if things have been slow, I would expect movement. If you have been in a period of reflection and if you've come to some conclusions about your life, the ability to actually take action on them is going to be coming soon-ish. This may be, so some of you, it's going to be right away. There's a handful that I think it comes in later, like December, January. And that is the reflection that you're having right now is in the next 6 weeks or so, is going to fuel the direction. Now, I say reflection because this is a card that talks about rest and legacy being what we leave behind in life. And so it's like looking at, actually, I'll show you on the card here. You've got this effigy of this person on a tomb. And the whole point being when somebody passes, what do we reflect on? We reflect on their life, what they did, what they left behind. This is a very good time to think about what you're doing in that capacity. What do you want to be remembered by? What do you want to say that was the thing that you did? If somebody, imagine your own, this is morbid a little, but imagine your own funeral. Not just what would people say, but what would you want them to say? What would you want them to say about what you do, how you show up in the world? Now, that being said, I do want to mention that it is reversed. And so that does mean that there is a heightened case of probably restlessness. I would expect insomnia. I would expect it's because you're reflecting. That's why. It's because there's so much going on and so much energy being processed that your brain is wanting you to be conscious for the whole thing, because we do subconscious work in our dreams, and dreaming will be heightened especially through September 17th with this the first eclipse is in Pisces, which rules dreams. So, but I also think there's going to be some people that if you're usually a dreamer, you might feel a little blocked from that. But if you don't usually dream, you might have an excess of that as well. And full moons which eclipses are full moons on steroids, they definitely cause insomnia. That's why the term lunatic comes from things. You know, the moon does weird things for us. And when it's eclipse season, they're extra spicy. It's basically like full moon energy for like 6 weeks. And so do be gentle on yourself. Make sure you're getting rest. Even if you can't sleep, rest, meaning sitting down, decompressing, meditating, doing yoga, whatever that looks like for you. Make sure you schedule in some extra self-care that is restful, some times off of your phone, spending time at a park or in nature. Really like make some point. And the more stressed out you feel, the more you're going to need that rest. The more like more heightened your emotions are. But in that rest, the reflection that you get is going to be very deep and very, very perceptive about what's changing and what's shifting in your life. And that feels pretty complete for these 3 cards.
Wow. That's absolutely fantastic. And thank you so much.
Of course. Like I said, it's one of the things that I do that I know I'm supposed to share with the world.
Oh, that's brilliant. So what resources do you recommend, daily tips, tools, to anyone that wants to start tarot reading?
So if you're looking to start, I know there's a lot of concepts and people saying you have to like be gifted a deck. I'm not a gatekeeper. Go do what you want to do. Find a deck you connect with. I do recommend everybody does get familiar with the Rider-Waite, which is the one I've been reading here. Looks like this in a lot of cases. It is the most widely known and, in my opinion, one of the most easy to read symbols. Like you can look at the card, the picture, and kind of get a sense of what it's talking about. So I'd recommend that. I would recommend spending the time to learn, to accept and learn all of the kind of general meanings of the cards, because you'll be able to read things from a book early on, most likely. Take it at face value, you know, but those deeper connections to the cards and the deeper meanings of the cards, those start to come once the memorization comes. And so you can get lucky with an intuitive download. And if something just comes through and it's really strong, you know, it feels right, take it. But it is a journey. So I do recommend getting some books as far as like, again, somebody who's already kind of gives you the rundown. One of my favorite ones, and actually when I teach workshops, I use games from this book because I think they're really fun in a group setting, is The Easiest Way to Read Tarot Ever by Dusty White. I had another book, I think, let me see if I can see what it is. It's Tarot Made Easy was the first one I ever used. But truth be told, as I've dove in a little more, it doesn't really teach you about the archetypes, but it can work right off the bat if you need just a face value book to read. And each deck too, when you get, especially once you get out of just the general like Rider-Waite deck, a lot of decks have their own books, and I love the depth that comes from a unique artist's artwork and things like that. So I definitely feel like there can be a whole range out there. And even when I'm reading for myself too, give yourself a break if you feel like it gets muddy or weird, because it does. I still have a hard time reading for myself sometimes, especially if I pull too many cards or I keep asking the same question. Yeah, the answer is going to get a little weird. You only have so many cards. But don't feel bad about don't feel bad about reading the book. Feel free to get something that has a resource for you to help facilitate your connection to cards, or cartomancy, which is the umbrella term, because not all card reading is tarot, but tarot is a card reading style. Cartomancy is the word. And so don't be afraid. I have 32 decks. It's getting out of hand.
Wow.
It's getting, but I like collecting them. I like buying them from local artists and things like that. And so it's really fun to connect with in that way. But I do recommend one of the more traditional decks as far as understanding the basic archetypes and the symbolism, because that is what makes tarot different than other forms of cartomancy. Oracle cards can follow any system. Tarot has a very structured system. So that's why I find it's a good place to start, because it does have that structured system, but it does take time to learn it and integrate all of the meanings, because it's 78 things. That's a lot to memorize. But luckily you've built in flashcards to have fun with that. But I would say that, and make sure you ground. If you're feeling scared of it, shield. Imagine a protective bubble around you, or a shield or armor. You can protect your own energy if it's something that makes you feel insecure. And so really just kind of trust it. And anybody who has questions, they're welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to share my expertise when I can. And it was just really nice connecting with you all. And I hope that that's some interesting guidance. And if you're looking for specific resources, feel free to let me know.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. And where can the listeners find you online? What's your website, Chanelle?
So right now it's Instagram is the best place to connect to me. I do have a website for my photography work, which is ChanelleBaronaPhotography.com. But Instagram is the easiest place to connect with me on a more public level. It's usually where I tend to post things. I have a broadcast channel for events that I work if you're based in my area. And it also, when I upload like a YouTube reading, I don't do a ton of them, but when I do, they'll be added there. So that's the best place to connect with me is definitely on Instagram. And I'm pretty active, so easy to reach.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I'll put your links in the show notes. So that's
Mm-hmm.
brilliant. Everyone that wants to connect with you, please do. And that just leaves me to say thank you for sharing your courageous journey and your deep, insightful wisdom and knowledge with us today. And by doing so, I know you have helped so many others. Chanelle Barona.
Thank you again for having me. It was so nice to meet you. And to all the listeners, it was nice to meet you all too, even though we didn't get to talk necessarily face to face. I'm here if you need me.
Oh, brilliant. So we are all about Create the Courage to Be Fearless podcast here. What is your definition of courage?
For me, I would say that courage doesn't exist without fear. There's no need for courage if you aren't feeling fear. And so for me, courage is the ability to navigate, integrate, and push past fear.